Hello everyone, this is Daniel with Tabletop Rambling. Um, we wanted to do a video of our playthrough of Roll for the Galaxy, which is a game by Rio Grande Games. It's an engine building game. It's a dice rolling game. It has a worker placement kind of feel, where the dice are your workers that you're assigning to different tasks. And you're trying to build this engine. So overall, I feel like the game has a great flow to it. You're trying to uh, pull out tiles from this bag and um, basically develop your little nook of the galaxy, and your dominance over the galaxy. But again, it's a very small kind of compact game where it doesn't have this grand feel to it, but I guess internally as you're building the engine, it kind of feels like it gets bigger, which is something I can appreciate because it's one of those things where, you don't have to lay down this massive board on the table and feel like it takes up so much game room and you're like, man, I don't, it can sometimes be overwhelming, but this doesn't feel overwhelming. You're piecing it together and getting it kind of built little by little, so it kind of feels like it grows with you. So that's a very good, interesting feel. The game basically has a 2 to 5 player capacity. I think it's best with like a 3 player, 3, 4 players, where the game feels like it moves quick enough and it doesn't feel like it gets bogged down. And because the way that you're trying to get this game going is everybody has to kind of do their actions almost at the same time. But sometimes that can feel a little tricky because, some people that know the game might move a little quicker than you. And if you feel like you're dragging the game behind a little bit, it can maybe feel a little nerve-wracking for that player. But overall, I feel like the game flows pretty nicely. Um, no matter how skilled you are at the game, I think you can assign the workers pretty quickly, and that doesn't really, matter too much. So let's explain the game a little bit. Let's see kind of what's going on in this video. So as you can kind of see, we got tiles on the board on the tableau in front of us. We have a hidden screen. We have things in front of the tableau. We have these things in the middle of the table, and you're like, okay, what's going on? Well, in this game, you basically have these dice that you're rolling behind the screen and secretly assigning your workers to these different tasks or these different phases that are going to initiate. So in the middle of the board, you'll see these X's, and at the top of the screen, you'll see something that looks like a little eye. Or if it wasn't covered, it would look like an eye. And that is Explorer. And then during Explorer, you're basically going to be able to reach in the bag, pull out a tile, and assign that tile depending on what side you want it. Because each tile has a planetary side and a development side. In development, you could basically develop different technologies that are going to help to create different engines for your workers that kind of make them more powerful as you go along, or for your planetary thing that's going to help you produce. And I'll get into that more as we go along. So the next phase on, actually the first, sorry, before I move ahead, there is something else you could do with Explorer. You can actually get credits. So the credits are how you basically get workers from your citizenry, which is basically where you see this on the tableau. It looks like a person kind of waving. That's the citizenry, and that's where you can basically take your citizens and put them into the cup. So the ones that aren't working, they're just kind of sitting there waiting to be assigned, and you have to pay money, one credit, which, as you can see on the bottom, you basically have a maximum of 10 credits you can get. Once you're beyond that, it's kind of pointless. But you basically can get a certain amount of workers into your cup, or all the workers, depending on how much money you have, and roll them, and that's basically the end of that. And you're going to assign them to the different tasks. So on the next phase, phase 2, is the triangle phase in the middle of the board, and that's development. So if you look over onto either side of the board, doesn't really matter, and you look on the actual player tablet, you'll see in the middle there is a diamond shape, which is development. So when you develop these certain components, you're going to put them into the front, and now they're, you got to assign, from my side of the board, it has a 6. So my side of the board is the one where you see I'm the green side, and I have a 6 development here. So I have to get 6 workers onto that to develop it. It's pretty steep, but it has a better effect. So anything that's a 6 or a 6 plus has a really good effect. It's going to be one of those continuations of giving you better victory points at the end. So those 6 plus ones are harder to get out, but it's for a reason, because they're better overall developments. On the next phase, you have planetary. Planetary would be the circular things, and essentially what those are going to do are give you more workers, or give you, when you develop them, when you go from your tableau to development, they usually give you another worker. So you're now going to get different dice, different color dice, which I'll explain later, that are going to actually do various things for your creation of your engine. And depending on the colored dice, you're actually going to get better results for the things that you're trying for. The next thing that we have is produce. So when you get those planets produced, and they're not I guess colorless planet is what they call them. They're gray planets. They don't produce any specific color. And you can't actually produce on a colorless planet. So there's no productions that can happen. But if they do have a color, then you can actually put a production of whatever resource you're going to get onto that planet if you do the produce phase. And then you have the ship phase, which is how you're going to get those those resources that you produce. Now that production that you're going to have on that planet can give you more credit. So depending on the colored dice, they'll be worth a certain amount of value in their actual in the credit that they can give you, or the victory points. You can score victory points. Now victory points are more based on the actual color of the planet matching the color of the dice that you produced on it, and also matching the color of the dice that you use to ship it. So if all 3 of those colors match, then you get up to 3 victory points for getting that production. But other than that, you can get credits to use for future things that you're going to put, you can get more workers out or things like that. So there's different values that you can assign, or you can basically get different things depending on what you're producing. So, but as I said, the shipping is how you're going to actually get that production. So as you're rolling these dice, you're going to get different faces on them. And when you assign them, the one that you put at the top, so when these screens actually go away and you see them, they're going to look similar to the board in the middle. Now if you can assign any side dice to one phase, no matter what it actually looks like on the dice. If you put that on the phase directly on your board in front of the screen, you can do that. It doesn't have to match. The ones that have to match are the ones that you're putting that are possibilities of happening. So what does that really mean? Well, when you're assigning the dice, you can only assign one specific phase to actually initiate. So if I really want to explore, I can make that happen by putting any dice, one dice, on that initiation of the explore phase. And when that happens, then that will initiate that action, and I get one basically free action for that. So it didn't have to match it. I could have put a ship dice on it. I could have put a development dice on the explore. It doesn't matter what the actual face of the dice was that I put on it. The ones that are below that area, so if I put dice below that, they have to match or they have to be wild. Wilds are little stars that are basically on those dice. Um, so then if they match, I get basically 2 actions for that. Or, if I have other ones that basically say, um, I didn't necessarily think that I wanted to explore completely. I wanted to basically assign something to this development because I have a massive development that I got to do, and I assign a dice to that. So any random dice could have been a ship dice to the development, and because I may have thought, what, my opponent is going to explore. There's probably going to be some exploration being happening on his side, so I'm gonna chance the fact that this might happen. So I'm gonna assign my explore die to the below area underneath that phase, and if he initiates that phase, I get to do it. So I get to basically almost take off. I basically get to use my understanding of what he might do to my advantage. So it's like, okay, even if I only initiated one phase and I knew I was only going to do one action, I might be able to squeeze in other actions depending on what other players do. And that's sort of the interaction that happens in this game. So you're basically trying to assume what other people are going to do, and you're trying to make the best of those actions. Um, and I think overall this game is a really well designed game. It's got a lot of thought put into it. Um, some things can kind of feel very random. So again, when you're pulling the tiles out of the bag to put your initial tableau or area together, it can kind of, it does feel very random. So you might get development and planet that don't really, feel like they kind of match each other. And as you're pulling and exploring different things, you might kind of feel like you're kind of almost building a broken engine. It can definitely feel like that at times. But at the same time, you're trying to make sure, okay, if this is the way it's going, I got to try to manipulate it the best that I can to do whatever I can to, to initiate the phases that I need to get the maximum amount of points that I can. So no matter how you feel like the engine's going, you got to make it work as best as you can. I would say the components of the game are really well built, actually. So like, obviously it's chipboard. So chipboard is, it's, how it is. You got a cardboard tableau, you got a cardboard pieces. So I mean, those are what they are. But the cup, everything feels very, everything has some meaningful production value to it. And I mean, really, that's overall that's it. It's, you're trying to score the victory points and you're trying to build your engine. That's the gist of the game. I kind of wanted to make this video where it's talking about some of my